First, I'll bring in the color wheel, and on the color wheel you can see all the various colors listed, as well as the 4 dimensions of color that you see right there. I'll be talking about that later on, but for now I just want to focus on tone and shade. Now, to reduce the intensity of a color and to get a tone, as it is defined by the Marin color triangle, you can mix complementary colors together, such as orange and blue, and complementary colors are diametrically opposite each other on the color wheel. Or you can mix, instead of complementary colors, you can mix near complementary colors, which are those colors that are next to the complementary color, which are, in this case, blue-green and blue-violet, since they are next to the blue. So the configuration is something like this. You can mix both of them together into the orange, or just one of them. So I'm going to add that orange color down here, and then pick up a little of that blue-green and add that, as well as some blue-violet, but I'm going to make it a lighter blue-violet so it's similar in value to the orange and the blue-green. And then I can mix them together like this, although in Photoshop it's difficult to do any kind of mixing. You can mix colors easily in Painter 12. And it's just like mixing actual paint with the brush. But in Photoshop, you can do this kind of mixing like I'm doing here, but it's not very good. It's not like working with actual paint or with Painter 12. But you can see that I've now reduced the intensity of orange and created this tone, or a grayed orange as it's referred to. So the tone is a grayed orange. Or I could just add one of the near complements, such as blue-green, and I've reduced the intensity of the orange. So that's another way that you can do it, by adding both near complements. You reduce the intensity even more than if you just add one of the near complements. This time I'm going to mix the orange color with a neutral gray, and first I'll add some black here and then add some white into the mixture, maybe a little more white to get that neutral gray, and then I'll take that and add it to the orange color here, and we'll see what we get. Now this mixture looks a little duller than this one or even that one. So you can see by using near complements you can get richer looking grayed colors. When using actual paint to mix these tones, or even when using Painter 12, you can see that the results are even more striking. That is, the mixtures with the neutral gray appear even more dull and dead looking compared to the mixtures using near complements. Even when you use a complement, such as the blue, you get a richer looking tone. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to add this orange and then some blue to it. Mix it in there. Now it reduces the intensity of the color, as you can see, turning it into a grayed orange, and it looks richer than this mixture does with the neutral gray. The intensity of the hue resulting from a mixture of two colors, the way I showed you, is determined by their distance apart upon the color wheel. To illustrate what I just said, Let's take orange again as an example. If I mix it with its complement, which is the color that is the furthest away from orange, then I can get the intensity of each of the colors, orange and blue, reduced in its intensity to a much greater degree than if I mix that color with a color that is closer to the orange, which would be blue-green, the near complement to orange. Now, the two colors when mixed together do reduce their intensity somewhat, but not to the degree that the intensity of the colors would be reduced if they were mixed with the complement of orange, which is blue. As I continue to move up the color wheel to the next color, to green, and I mix green with orange, that mixture then results in the intensity of both colors being reduced even less. So therefore, the orange and the green will appear more saturated in color than it would if I mixed blue-green with orange or blue with orange. The closer I get to the orange color, the more saturated the mixture will appear, and the less it will be reduced in its intensity. Now, if I select yellow-green, which is even closer to orange, and I mix those two colors together, the result will be colors that appear more saturated looking than the mixture that results from green and orange, because green is further away from the orange color than yellow-green is. So the closer I get to orange with the mixtures, the more saturated the color looks, the more brilliant it looks. As I've shown you, changes in the intensity of a color are produced by varying the interval on the color wheel at which the colors to be mixed are selected. The greatest interval is between the orange and the blue, as you can see here. They are complementary and therefore no similarity to each other. And because of that, when they are mixed in the right proportions, can produce a neutral gray. Whereas these other colors, when mixed with orange, can never produce a neutral gray. That can only be done with the complementary of a color. So, by varying the distance apart at which the two outlying hues are chosen for mixtures, such as in this case the orange and the blue, we may produce all degrees of intensity of any given color from full saturation to complete neutrality. And now I want to mention how you can get a shade without applying black to a color. To get a shade without black, you can use complementary colors. So, for example, if I select red from the color wheel here and add that down here, and then add its complementary color, which is green, I now end up with a mixture that is a shade of red. And these kind of mixtures usually work best with actual paint when you're mixing them together. So this kind of mixture with complementary colors to produce a shade can result in a richer, more lively, less dull and dead looking shade. The dimension of color, called intensity, refers to the chroma or saturation of a color, which is its brightness or dullness, its purity, how pure it is. What you also need to know is that when you're mixing colors, such as the orange, for example, with other colors that are not the complementary color, such as in this case the blue, but other colors like blue-green or yellow-green, you're not only changing the intensity or purity of the color, but you're also changing its hue to a certain extent also. So an orange color can end up looking a little like a different hue. For example, if I mix orange with yellow-green, what happens is that not only is the intensity or saturation of the orange reduced, as you can see, but there has occurred a change in hue as well. And now this mixture looks more like a reduced in intensity yellow-orange. Take another example. If I mix orange with red-violet, for example, I get this kind of mixture. And I'll add a little bit of red-violet to the orange. And you can see what is happening here. The hue is changing, as well as the intensity. And this looks more like a low intensity or low saturated red. It no longer looks orange. So those are the kind of changes that will occur depending on how far away the colors are that you're using to mix with a particular color. How large the interval of space is between colors on the color wheel, in other words. If I mix red-orange and orange together, then neither one reduces the intensity of the other color. And the result is a very slight change in hue. Very slight. Still looks like an orange. But if I use more of the red-orange in the mixture, then it changes more toward the red-orange. But the intensity of the colors hasn't been reduced because the colors are too close to each other on the color wheel. They're analogous. And when you mix analogous colors together, the colors remain brilliant looking. Their intensity is not reduced. Here's a rough sketch that I did to demonstrate the fact that you're using all of these 7 basic forms of color when you're working on a painting. So, for example, let's say I color the background with a blue. Now that blue, I'm going to tint. So I'm adding a tint of blue to the background. Then let's say the next thing is a tone. So I'm graying that blue and adding it here toward the top. So now I have a tone and I have a tint already. Then what about a shade? Well, I'll select, let's say, a violet, and I'll make a shade. Add a lot of black to the violet and darken it, thereby making it a dark shade of violet. And I'll add that to the figure, like this. And what about black? Well, if the value is really dark, you can use something other than black. Usually artists don't use black, so therefore you select something that is very dark and that appears almost like a black. Maybe this blue-violet here. And I could add that maybe to the ground area or better yet, on the leg of the figure, on both legs. So I have to go even darker now. Really dark, and that looks almost like black. And what about color? Well, color refers to more of a saturated color when referring to this Berlin color triangle. So maybe I could add, let's say, red-violet. And that red-violet is more saturated than the other colors. So maybe I could add it right here. Now what about gray? Well, gray refers to a neutral gray mixed with white and black when referring to the Berlin color triangle. So I can decide whether I want to use a neutral gray or not. Well, maybe I could use a neutral gray on his helmet here. So I'll select a lighter neutral gray. You can have neutral grays within your painting. Some parts could be true neutral grays with no color in them. And they contrast nicely with those areas that have color. Now, what about white? Well, I could add white to his spear here. And maybe little spots of white on the helmet, little highlights. And on the spear as well. And maybe a little white accent right there. Now, it doesn't have to be pure white. It could be near white or off-white. So already, you see, I'm using the various forms of color within this really rough color sketch. Just to demonstrate to you that when you're doing a painting, you're actually using all of these various forms of color. And now I'm going to paint this lower part here. Right now it's still a neutral gray. So I think I may use either a tone or a shade. Remember, a shade is a color that contains black, and a tone is a color that is derived by mixing a color or a neutral gray together, or a tint and black or white and a shade. But a shade is arrived at by mixing a color and black. So I'm going to go to the color picker and select a shade, and a shade is found below this diagonal here on the color picker. So right around here, if I make a selection, that would be a shade, and I'll add that over here in the foreground like this, and then I'll go back to the color picker, and this time I'll select a tone, which is along this diagonal, as I mentioned, or above it, somewhere around here maybe. And I'll see what that looks like. It's a little too saturated, so I'll desaturate it somewhat. But now it's too light in value. Let's see what that one looks like. Now it's too dark. Takes a while to get the right color. So I'll go with that for now. I have to darken this part here. So I'll pick up that shade, and then in the color picker, I'll reduce the value and add that over here. Now there's a greater feeling of depth because of this darker value in front of this lighter value here. Artists usually don't use black, even though it is on the Berlin color triangle. If an artist needs a really dark value that looks like a black or close to a black, the artist will mix together dark colors such as alizarin crimson, phthalo green, and burnt sienna, for example. And I'll select something that is a little close to these colors that I just mentioned. So this here could represent the alizarin crimson, a little more red in there, like this, and the phthalo green, something like this. A little more of the green hue, I think, is needed. And burnt sienna is a brown. It's an orange brown. It's made from orange, but it's a reduced in intensity and value orange color or hue. So it's something like this. And then the artist would mix these together and get a really dark looking color that resembles black. So the artist would get his or her black by mixing these colors together rather than using a black like this. So this kind of black is too dull, too dead looking compared to the kind of black that you get when you mix colors like these together, which is a much richer looking black. Now I can't really get the right mixture here in Photoshop, but if you used paint, you would be able to get the correct mixture. So instead of black, when you're using paint, consider using colors like these, and then that would be your black that you then mix with a color to get a shade instead of using an actual black. So you get richer looking colors that way when you use a black that is derived through this kind of mixture. While many artists do not use black in their mixtures, there are artists that have used black as a foil for brighter colors. For example, if I added black to the background here, and I'm doing this really quick as you can see, just make the entire background a black like this, the brighter colors then stand out much better. They are then seen as being even brighter, even richer in appearance. The black is acting as a foil for those brighter colors. Artists like the great Monet, the Impressionist artist, used black in this way. While he didn't use black in the mixtures of his colors, there were occasions where he used black as a foil for other colors. Other artists like the great Sargent also did this on occasions. So black could be used this way. Although you could mix it with colors, some artists do that. And if you get the right color relationships, even black mixed with colors and used with other colors that are more saturated can result in a really great looking color painting. It's all in how you handle black. So black can be used as a foil to enhance other colors, to make them richer looking, to make them more brilliant looking. As you can see with the red-violet color on the figure here. See how more brilliant that red-violet looks against this black background? The black is enhancing this color by making it appear more brilliant. And now a word about white. Usually the artist will not use a pure white. What the artist will do is use an off-white, something like this, where there's still a little bit of color to be seen. But when added to the painting, it looks like a white, or pretty close to it, but it's not an actual white. If I picked up the white from here and added that over here, you can see the difference. I should mention that white is considered a cold color. If you have a form on which there is white, let's say like this, but you want that part of the form to appear warm, you need to warm up that white. And you do that by mixing in a little yellow maybe, or a little orange, some warm color, just a little bit. And that little bit will warm up that cold white, like this. Already you can see it looks warmer than it did before. If it's still too cool, you add a little bit more of the warmer color. The idea is with many artists that they never use pure white. They always add a little bit of color to that white. And then they mix that white with other colors. As you can see, I brought in the color wheel. And I want to point something out to you, that when you want brilliant color within your paintings, you need to use the actual value of that particular color. As soon as you add white or black to that color, you change it. And by changing it, you reduce its brilliance. So if, for example, I pick up this red-orange here and add it over here, this is a brilliant color, a very saturated color, as you can see, because it exists at its actual value. But as soon as I add some white to lighten that color, it loses some of its brilliance, as you can see here. This part doesn't look as saturated or brilliant as this part. Now, if I wanted to darken that color by adding black to it, I also change its value, and it's no longer as saturated as before. In both cases, the value has also been changed. This is a lighter value than this value here, and this is a darker value than this value. And because of that, each of these colors is of lower saturation, because they do not exist at the same value that this color exists at. These do not have the same value, in other words. As soon as you change the value of the color, then you're reducing its brilliance. Even if I add, let's say, a different color instead of white or black, I add a little bit of the yellow here. Now that orange, that red orange, is no longer a red orange. It's now changed its hue somewhat. So I no longer have that same brilliant red-orange color that I have here. Now I have a brilliant orange color. So no matter what I do here to this color, adding white or black or another hue, or even adding its complementary color, which is blue, adding a little bit of that here, I've changed the intensity of the red-orange. It's no longer as brilliant as it was before. The value could stay the same, but the fact that I added a complementary color reduces the intensity of the orange color. So if I want really brilliant color, then I need to stay with the actual value of that color. Otherwise, its brilliance will be reduced, or its saturation. I'm going to turn this into a grayscale so that you can see the values of the colors here on the color wheel. See, each of these values enables that color to be as brilliant as it is. So if you want brilliance, use the actual value of the color itself. Don't change the value. I can pick up this red-orange here as it is, and then add it to the figure like this. Now, if it's too intense in color, I can reduce that intensity by adding a little bit of the complementary color, just a slight tinge of that complementary to reduce its color, but I'm not reducing its value. But if I want more brilliance, then I won't add any complementary color. I'll just use that color as it is with its actual value. But if I add white to lighten that red-orange, as I showed you in the example, then I'm changing the brilliance or saturation of that color. And it's no longer as brilliant. So if you want brilliance of color, don't change what the actual value of that color is. Stick to that value. You can see how brilliant this red-orange looks. But it's not just because I'm using the actual value of that color. It's also because that color is being seen against this black background. And in addition to that, I placed it next to this low intensity blue-violet. So all of those things taken together produce this brilliant or very saturated looking red-orange. I decided to add a little white accent right there. And this helps to lead the eye up to the face. The eye of the viewer is drawn to that white. White, or a very light value within a picture, always attracts the eye. So the eye of the viewer is drawn to that light part of the picture. So using white or a very light value is a way through which you can lead the eye of the viewer to the center of interest. And therefore, in this rough color sketch, the center of interest is actually right here where the face is. You've seen in my demonstration here how I've been using all these various forms of color of the Marin colored triangle. So you can see how useful these forms of color are in producing a painting. And you can see that they're being used all the time when you do a painting. As you can see, I did a little rearranging. And in addition to knowing what the 7 forms of color are that I showed you here, you also need to know the color circle and the various dimensions of color that I listed here in order to be able to achieve really great color. Without the knowledge of these, it's just like shooting in the dark to try to get great color. You won't know what you're doing. Now I want to go over these dimensions of color, starting with hue. Hue refers to the name of the color, such as a yellow hue, or you'd refer to this as a red hue or a green hue. Hue refers, in other words, to the attribute of a color. So a color can be green, that is its attribute. A color can be blue, that is its attribute. Next is value. Every color has a value, and value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. I'll show you the values of these colors, and there they are. Lighter values, darker values. Next up is intensity, and that refers to how saturated a color is, how bright it is. For example, this yellow-green is a highly saturated color. It is an intense color. But if I add its complement, which is this red-violet, to that yellow-green, it is then neutralized. That is, it becomes a grayed yellow-green, and it no longer has that intensity that it did before. It has been reduced in its intensity. So intensity refers to the degree of saturation, how saturated the color is. More or less saturated? Is it more grayed, or is it more pure, more intense? Next up is temperature. Every color has a temperature, and usually this isn't listed when they list the dimensions of color, but I've listed temperature among these dimensions because it's easier that way, I think, to remember that every hue has a temperature. Usually when hue is referred to, temperature is also thought of automatically, since every hue has a temperature. But I think it's better to list it separately. And the colors that you see here on this side of the color wheel are considered cool, while these colors are considered warm, with yellow-green and red-violet lying somewhere between the cooler and warmer colors. Neither really warm or cool. Now, any color that moves in the direction toward yellow becomes warmer in hue. Any color that moves toward blue becomes cooler in hue. To warm a color, just add some yellow. To cool a color, just add some blue to it. I've added the names of the various colors so you can easily identify what these colors are on the color wheel. In a color painting, there needs to be color variety. Variety adds interest. Now, how do you get that kind of variety? It will make your color really exciting looking and interesting. There are different ways, and I'm going to point them out to you. One way to get interesting color is not by just selecting one color like this and then adding it. And then you select another color and you add another color and another color you add and so on to try to get color variety. There's another way, and that way is the way of mingling colors together. When you mingle colors, you select colors that are certain distances apart from each other, such as, for example, yellow and then red. Now, when I mingle these colors together, I'll get all the colors in between red and yellow plus red and yellow. Using this method, you get a wide range of different related colors, which means that these colors are then in harmony. So this is a quick way to get color variety plus harmony of color into your paintings. So I'll pick up the yellow and then add it here. In addition, I'll pick up the red from the color wheel and add that here as well. Now, you can't mix these colors together in the same way that when you use paint and a brush. Photoshop doesn't allow you to do that. So you can't mingle the colors like you would when using paint and a brush. But you can do something similar, which is to select the smudge tool from the toolbar and then, having its strength maybe around 70% or so, you then mix these colors together like this, mingle them together. And by doing that, you get this variety of different hues. Some more yellow-orange, some more orange. So this is the closest that you're going to get to mingling colors with Photoshop. If you're using paint and a brush, you'll be able to mingle these colors even better to get even more interesting varieties of color when you mix yellow and red together. With this method, the colors become interwoven with each other and create a more lively looking color than if you mixed colors together so that there isn't this kind of broken color or mingling of color. When you just have a flat color because of too much mixing that was done, you don't get that kind of color variety that makes for really interesting color. If you want to give it some texture so that it doesn't look too smooth, now you may want the smooth look, but if you don't, if you want somewhat of a textured appearance, you could do this by going to the filter menu and artistic, and then down to dry brush, and create something with that by sliding the brush size over toward the right or the brush detail to the left. Just move the sliders around until you come up with something that looks interesting and not so smooth. So I'll leave it at that, see what it looks like. And you can see that it has a bit of a rough texture now. It's not so smooth looking. The more colors you include within the range of colors that you select, the greater the color variety is going to be. So if I select, let's say, yellow-green and blue-green, I'm going to get quite a bit of color variety. All of these colors between yellow-green and blue-green, and all sorts of different intensities of these colors as well. While you can get a great variety of color this way, it's usually best to limit the range of colors that you're going to mingle. And usually that range is limited to 3 colors. You can extend that range to 4 colors, but usually you want to keep the mixture simple and get the greatest amount of variety of color through the fewest number of colors in order to keep things under control and so that you can easily achieve harmony of color. Usually it's a good idea to keep those 3 colors as part of a color family. Now, what are color families? Well, I'll show you here. There's yellow-orange, there's yellow, and there's yellow-green. Now, this is a color family. And the reason for that is because each color has yellow in it. Yellow-orange, yellow, and yellow-green. Green is not part of that family because it just says green. It doesn't say yellow-green. Yellow-green is up here. So all the colors that have the word yellow in it are part of that color family. Now, over here, yellow-green, green, and blue-green are a color family. And that's because all of these colors have the word green in them. Yellow-green, green, blue-green. They're all closely related and therefore in harmony. Now, these colors are a color family as well because they all have the word blue. Blue-green, blue, blue-violet. Next are these colors. And that's because they all have the word violet. Blue-violet, violet, red-violet. So they're all closely related. And the next group of colors is these. And again, that's because they all have red. Red-orange, red, red-violet. So they're all closely related. Next, there is the orange family of colors, which are these. Each color has the word orange in it. So these colors that I just pointed out to you are referred to as the yellow family of colors, the green family of colors, the blue family of colors, the violet family of colors, the red family of colors, the orange family of colors. When you're using a color, such as, for example, red, in your painting, that red should be accompanied by those colors that are adjacent to it, which is red-violet and red-orange. So I have my 3 colors that are part of the color family. So I would add a little bit of the red-violet and then some of the red, orange, and then mingle them together. I brought back the 4 dimensions of color that I introduced you to earlier. You need to be aware of those when mixing your colors, and when you mingle the colors, these will change within those colors that you create through mingling. Now I'm going to continue mingling these colors that I started mingling. Add some red, orange, and then a little bit more of the red violet, and I'll mix them together like this, mingling them, and they're very closely related. So they create a nice range of various colors and intensities as well. The red violet helps to reduce the intensity of the red orange, for example. I'm using rather saturated colors here to mix these colors, but of course you don't have to use saturated colors like this. You can use colors that are more grayed. So for example, let's say I want to mix a green. I can select a lower intensity green from the color picker and add that here. And then I could add a blue-green and a blue from the color picker. Just bring up the slider somewhere around here, blue-green, and it's the same value as the green. And then I could add some yellow-green. Grayed yellow-green, I can raise the value a little bit, change it a little like that, and then mix these more muted colors together, mingling them like this. And the result is color that is of lower intensity. But you still get this interweaving of colors, creating color variety. Now, introducing discordant colors within a mixture adds vitality, vibrancy, and energy, and additional interest to a color combination. Now, what that means is that if I, for example, use these 3 colors here in my mixture, I could introduce a 4th color, red-violet, which acts as the cooler color. These 3 up here are all warm, while the red-violet, when compared to these 3, appears cooler. So I could do something like this, and then add the yellow and the orange, and then the red-violet as well, and mix them together or mingle them. And they need to be mingled in such a way that you still see the various colors there. Don't mix them too thoroughly. So now you see a combination of warmer and cooler colors, and the mixture has greater vibrancy of color. And then you can add colors if you need to. So if I think I need some more yellow, I can add that and then mix it in. You see that variety of color that exists there? Much more interesting than if you just added a flat color without this mingling going on. Within these colors, you can see varying degrees of intensity of colors. You can see different colored grays, and that's because I've mixed a near complementary color with yellow, which is the red-violet. When you mix near complements together, you get beautiful grayed colors, beautiful colors that have been reduced in their intensity, and you can get varying degrees of intensity. However, you also get a change in the hue. A true complement is the color that is directly opposite the color on the color wheel. So the true complement for yellow would be violet. It is directly opposite, and therefore it is the true complement. However, any color that lies on either side of the true complement, which is the red-violet that I just mentioned, or the blue-violet, are near complements to the yellow, and will also reduce the intensity of the yellow as well as the intensity of the red-violet if I select that to be my near complement. But the mixture will never result in a true gray. That you only get when you mix together true complements. Those colors, when mixed together, that are next to each other on the color wheel, such as these, for example, produce brilliant color. However, if I move further away from a color, such as orange, to another color like red-violet, and mix that into the orange, then the mixture will no longer be a brilliant mixture, because that orange will be somewhat lowered in intensity. It will be grayed somewhat. So here's the orange, and now I'm going to add the red-violet and mix that in there like this. And you can see that this part here appears more gray looking than this part here. And that's because of the red-violet being mixed together with the orange, which lowers the intensity of the orange somewhat. Now, if I move further away from the orange color to, let's say, blue, now the mixture is going to be lowered even more in intensity, because blue is the complement, the true complement of orange. And the mixture also can result in a neutral color when those two colors are mixed together in the right proportion, which you never get when you mix a color with its near complement rather than with its true complement. So mixing colors with the near complement will result in richer looking colors, but yet they will be muted somewhat, while mixing colors with true complements can result in mixtures that look more grayed, more neutralized, and eventually, as I mentioned, when you mix them in the right proportion, you get a true gray. Now, what would these kind of intermingling of colors look like when applied to an actual painting? Well, I'm going to apply them to this rough black and white sketch that I did, and what I'm going to do first is lower the intensity of all of these colors a bit. So I go to Image, down to Adjustments, and select Hue Saturation, and then reduce the intensity. I don't want the colors to look too raw,